Now let's deep dive into each component that we have in the workbench that below the API call. So we will begin with authorizing requests. So APIs use authorization to ensure the client requests access data securely. This can involve authenticating the sender of a request and confirming that they have permission to access or manipulate the relevant data. If you are building an API, you can choose from a variety of auth models. Let me show you that. Okay, in that I'll go to the workspace of my workspace. Yeah, this is fine. Okay, and we have a variety of methods. Let me zoom it much more. Yeah, now it will be pretty clear. Yeah, so these are different methods that we have. I'll keep it. So the required authorization will be specified by the API provider. So we can pass auth details along with any request you send in Postman. So auth data can be included in the header, body, or as parameters to a request. If you enter your auth details in the authorization tab, this tab, Postman will automatically populate the relevant parts of the request for your chosen auth type. You can use variables and collections to define authorization details more safely and efficiently, enabling you to reuse the same information in multiple places. So, some of the authorization tabs that we can see here on your screen. Okay, these are all request level authorization methods, and similarly we can have collection level authorization methods. Okay, we will deep dive into the each method inside these auth methods. So with a request open in Postman, see my request is open in Postman, and we use the authorization tab to select an auth type, then complete the relevant details for our selected type. So the correct data values will be determined by our API at the server side. If you are using the third party API, refer to the provider's documentation always for any required auth details. I've shown you one Volvo documentation, so that's how we refer the documentation, and we'll find out how to work on that API using the Postman. That's how we do. So then, when you select a type from the type drop down menu or drop down list, Postman will indicate which parts of the request your details will be included in. For example, the header. You see this is header, and you have the body, and you have a query parameters on this side, and Postman adds your auth details to the relevant parts of the request when you select or enter them. So you can preview how your data will be sent before you run the request. So your auth data will appear in the relevant parts of the request. For example, in the header tab. So if you have a request ID, we would have gotten, I'll show you that also, request ID. So this is a different one, and this is authorization, inherit from auth, and we use the basic auth, and you see that basic auth. Now let me click on, you see that authorization, you have this one is basic, other one accept, this is absolutely fine, but here you have a basic auth. Okay, clear? So now let's we can let's look into the each and every method that is available here. Okay, authorization types. So no auth, API key and bearer token, basic auth, digest auth, auth 1.4, 2.4, and Hawk authentication. Okay, so let us look into the first authentication method, which is inherit auth. Inherit auth. So inheriting authorization. If you group your requests in collections and folders, you can specify auth details to reuse throughout a group. By default, requests inside the collection or folder will inherit auth from the parent, which means that they will use the same auth that you have specified at the folder or collection level. So to change this for an individual request, make a different selection in the request authorization table. For example, so here this is our collection, okay, and I have given this username and password. That's basic auth at the collection level. So now what I will do is, this is my basic auth in the request level, so I will remove this. No, I don't need to remove. So in spite of selecting the basic auth, I will click on inherit auth from parent, because I have given at the collection level. Okay, so I'll inherit auth from parent and I will send a request and we'll see what's going to happen. This is high level, very secure, and you see that 200 okay, and it's successful. Within 2.81 seconds we got the response, and it's a very big data. I cannot show you, I can show it to you, I can't show it to you as per the rules and regulations. So that's the reason I'm not revealing what kind of data it is, but this is how we will actually work on a real scenario APIs and real use cases of APIs we are looking into now. Okay, when so taking data from a public API is pretty easy, no authorization, no security issues. But when it comes to the actual production case APIs, we are going to face a lot of challenges. So that's the reason I'm explaining each and everything. We'll begin with we have begun with authorization, and we are slowly moving into the more complicated stuff. Okay, so that's how we inherit. Will set the basic auth at the collection level, and we inherit to our APIs. That's one. That's the first step, inherit auth from parent. And second one, we have no auth. So postman, this is no auth. When we say no auth, postman won't send authorization details with a request unless you specify an auth type. If your request doesn't require authorization, select no auth from the authorization tab drop down list. If our request requires authorization, and if you still type no auth, let's see what's going to happen. You're gonna get this error, status 401 unauthorized. You are unauthorized to access the API. That's what it's saying. So that's why if if that API is public and if it is not required, so let me go to the other workspace. That's API Exploring Universe, and what I'll do here is I'll simply, okay, I'll come to this. Let me click on send, and you should see this information, and I'll come to authorization. So here I put inherit auth from parent. Now I'll put no auth. This is public API, and let me resend the request, and still you're able to get the data. You see that? And I'll change the parameters and I'll put it to, we'll change it, and we should get the employee ID to record. You see that we'll still able to get even with the authorization no auth, because that this is a public API, it doesn't require authorization. That's where we can use a no auth. Okay, let me resend it. Let me change the parameter this time to 1 and we'll get the record. Yes, you see that ID1. I think it's clear. No auth. So now let's get into the another type. So this time it's API key. So next one is API key. With API key auth, you send a key value pair to the API either in the request headers to query parameters. In the request authorization tab, select API key from the type list, enter your key name. This is the key name. API, I'll say key 1. And the value we have to type here. We have to paste the value, key value paste. We have to paste it here. And once it is done, then we have to add it to the where you want, whether you want to add it to the header or add it to the query params, whichever is the one that you have to select, either header or query params from the add to drop down list. So we can store your values in variables as an extra security also. We can store this key value pair as a API key as a variable also. That's also pretty much possible. Okay. Then what we have here is, so if you want to save it as a variable, the value, if you want to save it as a variable, so what we have to do is we have to create a variable and then we have to attach that value to the variable, and then the variable name should be mentioned like this. So for example, a key value, this is my API key value. That's the variable that we have given. That's it. Of course, at this moment there is no variable such because we haven't created it. Let me remove that and let me put some random. Okay, so that's how our API key works. Then we have bearer token. Bearer tokens enable requests to authenticate using an access key, such as JSON Web Token. We call it as a JWT in short. So the token is a text string included in the request header in the request authorization tab. Select bearer token, and once you select this bearer token from this drop down list, it will take you this window. Okay, then the token field, here it consists of a token field. Inside this token field we have to enter our API key value, and for added security we can use a variable type saying token var. Of course we do not have this, so it won't work. So you can directly paste the token if you want. So enter your API key value for added. Okay, we can take the variable also, that's fine. Then the next one we have seen before, that's the basic auth. So basic authentication involves sending a verified username and password with your request. In the request authorization tab, select basic auth from the type drop down list. And here is, I'm going to select it. And here you can see my basic auth. Of course, here my basic auth is not required, but I have put it to the collection, so it's been taken directly from the collection. Okay, that's what. So now I had to mention the username here. So user name, and here I had to mention the password, saying password. So that's my password. Okay. Once you provide your username and password fields, that's enough. We can use it. But in spite of that, you can do one more thing. Simply create a username variable. If you don't want to expose this username and password to the external users, you just create username and password, or we can say random password also, whichever is fine. Either a random password or else your own password, whichever is the one you can create, you can use it. Okay, so or else there is one more way we can encode these things using base 64. So the next authorization type we have is digest auth. So with digest auth, the client sends a first request to the API, and the server responds with a few details, including a number that can be used only once, or a nonce rem value, and a 401 unauthorized response. You then send back an encrypted array of data, including the username and password combined with the data received from the server in the first request. So the server uses past data to generate an encrypted string and compares it against what you sent to the authenticate your request. So that's what called a digest auth. A digest auth, you see that here, this is the information should be provided. Let me check, uncheck this. You'll have an advanced, and some more information we can find out from here. However, let's look into the one more another type of authorization, that is OAuth 1.4. What is OAuth 1.4? OAuth 1.4 enables client application to access data provided by third party API. For example, as a user of a service, you can grant another application access to your data with that service without exposing details like your username and password. So accessing user data with OAuth 1.4 involves a few requests back and forth. So let me click on this, and this is how it looks. So this is the information we have to provide. So OAuth 1.1 is sometimes referred to as a two-legged auth, only between client and service server, or three-legged where a client requests data for a user of a third-party service. An example of OAuth 1.0 flow could run as like this. Basically, it to request user data with a third-party service, a consumer or a client application requests an access token using credentials such as key. You see that here, consumer key, consumer secret, access token, and access token and access secret. These are pretty much important. Without this, it's impossible. So once it uses the credentials such as key and secret, the service provider issues an initial token, and the consumer requests the authorization from the user. When the user grants auth, the consumer makes a request to exchange the temporary token for an access token, passing verification from the user auth. The service provider returns the access token, and the consumer can then make requests to the service provider to access the user data. So here we have to provide the following information, and you can see that on your screen. So type, we will select OAuth 1.0, and then signature method. There are different types in this drop down list. The first one is HMAC SHA-1, HMAC SHA-256. These are shell authorizations, and RSA shell authorization, RSA shell authorization 256, RSA shell authorization 5112, and then simply plain text. So whatever you choose, it's not an issue. So if your server requires HMAC or plain text signature, Postman will provide. If that case, HMAC, we need all this information. If it is RSA, you need only two, that's consumer key and access token, or else if you want to attach, see, but you have to paste the private key. Either you can select a file or it's a shell key dot ppm. So where we'll have a public key and private key will be created from the secure shell SSH, or else we can basically say plain text. Still you require four parameters: consumer key, consumer secret, access token, and token secret. These all parameters will be required. So if you are using RSA signature, Postman will present only consumer key, access token, and the private key input. That's it. So we can optionally set advanced details, otherwise Postman will try to auto-complete this. Okay. So once we provide this information, and rest all will fall into the place. Okay. So then we will look into the another type of method, OAuth 2.0. It's by and large similar. Let me click on that OAuth 2.0 also. Yeah. So we can directly select the tokens. No so at this moment we do not have a token. So here we can select the available tokens and we can automatically it will populate. So auto refresh token or share token, whichever is the way, we can move ahead. And confirming new token, and here you have a complete information: token name, grant type, authorization code, auth URL, access token URL, client UD, URL, client ID, client secret, scope, state, everything, and then we can access the new token. So that's how OAuth 2.4 works. And after that we have few more. That's Hawk authentication. So AWS signature, let me click on AWS signature here. So in AWS signature, so we have to provide the following information, such as let me scroll up a bit. Anyway, here we have in advanced tab, we have to mention AWS region, which region we have our services, and that that it wants to access our Postman, and then service name, what type of service name we are using, or in which region we have our API server, and then which service from AWS it's using, S3 bucket example, and then session token. You have to provide the session token. That's what the information that we have to provide here. In addition to that, access key and secret keys, anyway it's required, because we need anyway we'll create that IAM user. When we create an IAM user, we will get the access key and secret key, and we can include that access key and secret key and AWS region, and then um, other parameters such as service name and session token. That's it. Our AWS signature will be done. So here we have two types, either request headers or request URL, for whatever it may be. So let me click on request headers or request URLs. We can add this authorization data to either request headers or request URL. So whichever is fine. Then another type we have NTLM authentication, and then Akamai Edge. These are little complicated and advanced. I would urge you to explore. So by the time we will move on to the another concept. So that's what we have seen. So Hawk authentication and all types, by and large we have seen all the types.